Okay, thanks, Cahill, and just welcome to the witnesses, and thanks for coming in. I want to concentrate a bit on the civil defence. Just acknowledge that the upgrade of the equipment, I can see in County Laois, I mean, it's gone from a very, very poor situation to a very, very good situation. I don't know if you've seen the new accommodation, Ms. Carty, and you can see, you know, and just acknowledge the work of the County Council in helping to get that in place. And the Civil Defence Unit headed by Damien Dollar, who has done tremendous work along with the volunteers there. Huge amount of work even on the centre itself in terms of improving it. The questions I suppose I have is that at the moment the funding model is 70-30, 70% Department of Defence. And you might just tell me what the budget was last year. I think there's a difference of a couple of million. I saw a figure of 3.5 million in the middle of all of the other figures we're trying to watch over the last 2 weeks. You might just tell me what that is. But 70-30, local authority provides 30. But in actual practice, what's happening is it's now becoming more like 50-50. And, you know, the local authority obviously has a lot of other demands on it. Just there's a concern there that at local authority level, I suppose, local authority members, that they're being asked to come up with more than more than they should. And of course, overall, then civil defence itself, that has adequate funding. And you might just address that for me, please. The boat and vehicle replacement. You know, look, just acknowledge. You know, sometimes we complain about shortcomings, but really the equipment has improved. I have a family member in it, and I'm more familiar with it than I used to be. Even though when I was a local authority member, I had a good bit of interaction with it, but I've got a better look at it over the last 7 or 8 years. But in terms of the replacement of equipment and vehicles and boats, it's run over reliance on the dormant fund. And in relation to the department, in terms of required permissions for boat operations, do you have all of those? I'm trying to keep my questions short. I just want to say something to you about, and also to Mr. McMorland. You know, I've read your note that you provided for the committee, your opening statements very carefully last night, and you know it's good and very detailed and all that. But just a concern I have is that, there's a lot of acronyms in them, and I might go back through it and keep checking what each one of them meant. But you know, there's a lot happening up there, but on the ground there's a real problem. And I tell you what, there's a real problem, and it's shown up in recent storm and recent emergencies, that there isn't the local authority staff in the municipal districts to deal with problems. If you have an overseer that's half a dozen general operatives, they're the people who go out and carry out the preventative maintenance work. And because that's not carried out, you have flooding. Sometimes it's because of a shopping trolley stuck in a weir or a pallet, or brambles or whatever else. As simple as that, and you have a whole housing estate flooded. Just that basic maintenance work to prevent that type of issue. And the same with DSB, by the way. DSB pared back its core staff in recent years and depended on contractors, which sometimes can be very hard to get, and definitely very difficult in a storm, in an emergency. You can't put your hand on them. You can put your hand on your own workers, and I'm just highlighting that. And it's an issue, while it's all happening up there at your level, and I mean this in a very respectful way, on the ground, it's the people who put on the high-vis jackets and the protective clothing, and who go out there in all weathers to try and get things back together again, and to alleviate flooding. There's a real problem and a real shortage of frontline workers in the local authorities, and there's no way of getting around this. It's shown every day, and I'm sure other public representatives here can see it, and county councillors definitely see it, because they're the first line of defence, and they're the ones the public turn to. So that needs to be addressed. The volunteers, you're trying to go from 1,800 to around 3,500. I hope that works out. And it seems to be, there seems to be recruits coming in. I know in Laois I think there's some new recruits coming in. But just to say as well that, the volunteer ethos is very important. But I'm not sure about this, because how this should be dealt with. But there may be an issue there, and Senator Crockwell mentioned, labour law and all of that. But I have heard the mobile phone going off maybe at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, and the heavy boots going down the stairs, and then have to turn in for work the next morning, up for 6:30 to go into work. and it could be a call out for a rescue, search and rescue in the Schlee Blooms, right? And there's been a good few of those now in the last year. How we handle that, because, I mean, an employer, you know, can you tell an employer I can't be in because I've been out all night with civil defence? I don't know, I just want to put that, you know, but I think the volunteer ETOS is very important. That's it. That's my lot, just if we can answer that. Thank you. And just to say well done, by the way. I read some of the booklet on the 75th anniversary. I intend reading more of it. All right? Thanks.
Thanks, Deputy Stanley. And again, thank you to your family member for volunteering with Civil Defence. And also thank you to your Civil Defence officer who works very closely with us. To answer your question, I have seen the unit. When I joined Civil Defence 2 years ago, we made a point of visiting all of the units across the country, all 28 of them, because we wanted to understand how the units were operating, what obstacles they had to operating in each area, etc. So that work was completed, and we're delighted that Laois have the new unit, and we do appreciate the support from the Laois Local Authority in that regard. Just recently, the Civil Defence officer in Laois went to the UK for us, actually, because we're trying to broaden and have a national approach to search and rescue, and we're looking to align with the Association of Lowland Search and Rescue in the UK. So your Civil Defence officer, who's an expert in the area of search and rescue, represented us there with someone from Kilkenny. So I think that's just evidence of how we're working with the Civil Defence units and how important it is that we use their expertise on the ground. You spoke about funding, and I want to come at it from three angles, really. The first is that, yes, our grant is of the order of 6.5 million. That is broken down into operational grants of about 3.5 million. So that may be where you're seeing that other figure. And we have increased our budget by 15% over the last few years, and we will continue to seek increases, provided that we can be assured that we're able to use the funding, because we don't want to seek funding and then not have the time to do it properly in accordance with procurement rules and value for money. So it's trying to find the balance between the two of those. I know there is a perception that the funding is 70%, 30% and moving towards 50-50, but I would counter that by saying that we have moved a lot of the procurement in-house. So while the operational grant is run on a 70-30 basis, we have actually moved to bring central procurement in-house for uniforms, for all of our personal protective equipment, for the boats,
rather than each unit.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So that kind of addresses that a little bit, while you might be seeing that, and certainly the local authority do make a good contribution to civil defence. It is also the case that we're ring-fencing a pool of money centrally so that we can provide the same uniforms, the same PPE, we can buy drones, sonar, etc., and particularly now the rest centre and evacuation centre equipment, because what we want to make sure is that all units have the same type of equipment, they're all able to operate effectively. So we need to look at it in the round. It's not just the operational grants, it's the central money that's being spent as well. You're correct that we do use dormant account funding very significantly. I think when I looked back, it was 2.7 million over the past 5 years. That is fairly significant funding, and we have sought that again this year. We have sought another 400,000 to do more in terms of upgrading our fleet and boats. Certainly we do want to reduce our reliance on that, but for now it's available and we will take it and we will upgrade the fleet. I think it's important that we do that central procurement and that we continue to upgrade the fleet, because the breadth of activity of civil defence is significant and regulation now is significant. So it's really important that we get that central training, central standard operating guidelines, etc. in place so that we can better manage the regulation and governance and keep our volunteers safe. You mentioned whether we have everything that we need in the boat space. We are in the process of looking at the boat licensing piece. It is a challenge for us because civil defence breadth of activity is so vast. We could be involved in search and rescue. We could be involved in sampling water with the local authorities. We may be required to recover a body in the event of a missing person search that might require guards or somebody else to be on the boat. So there is a challenge there between the passenger boat licence and the use of the boat for other activities that we are negotiating at the moment. And I do take your point about the labour law. I think that's a wider policy piece that we do need to consider as we move forward. I know that other countries mandate volunteering days, and that is paid for from the government, but it's a much wider issue that would have to be considered in the round and through extensive policy engagement. But it is something that we're aware of, and as part of our engagement with CDOs, we do ask them to be very aware of the response from volunteers and to manage that as best they can, so that we protect the health and safety of volunteers.
But at present, there is no protocol there, or no rule there in terms of, you know, what happens with a volunteer that's out during the night in terms of the next morning.
No, and it wouldn't be within my policy space, to be honest. What we try to do within our policy space is to manage the hours that they do respond for with civil defence.
And could I just ask, Oireachtas, just with your permission, in terms of the frontline staff, particularly in local authorities, but also in DSP, you know, just a response on that, because that is, if you have an overseer in a whole municipal district with just a handful of workers, handful of outdoor workers, you're in trouble in terms of maintenance when the emergency does come. In terms of building up to emergencies, it compounds the situation. And actually the response then as well, you don't have the sufficient numbers to respond. Is that being discussed at any level?
That's not within my space, to be honest.
Mr. Morland maybe might respond to that, I thought.
Thank you, Deputy. And just to reiterate what you said in the praise for the local authority workers during crisis, it's phenomenal the work that they do, particularly in preparing and treating roads and the chainsaw crews that go out and clear those roads when we have damage during storms. I highlighted to the Senator that we have a lead government department model, so I need to be very careful that I don't slip into another department's policy area. But what I can say is that we are working with colleagues now to ensure that we plug the utilities in. So it's not just about DSB, but Uisce Éireann and the telecommunications providers, that we plug them into the local authority system.
I know you don't want to step on anyone else's toes, I understand that, but can I ask you, within the emergency plan unit, is it recognised that unless you have sufficient staff on the ground, is this issue, in other words, has it come up on your radar? Because I'd be very concerned if it hasn't.
Deputy, I wouldn't stray into another department's policy here, because we wouldn't have any responsibility for local government.
Yeah, no, you haven't. But it's just, I think it's an issue that needs to be, you know, if you're involved in emergency planning, I don't think that we can let today go without highlighting this.
Thanks, Deputy, and we'll note that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I think it is obviously very significant for the whole of the operation. There's no point in having all these strategies and plans and everything else if we don't
have people to implement them.
Yes, if we don't have enough feet in the ground. So maybe that's something maybe even we'll discuss in private session to see how we can bring forward to highlight that on the committee.